All right, we're going to get started. So thank you and welcome everybody. My name is Andrew Berman and I'm the Executive Director of Village Preservation. And we, along with the City Club of New York, Friends of the Upper East Side Historic District, Historic Districts Council, Landmark West, and the New York Landmarks Conservancy are co-sponsoring tonight's forum on preservation issues with candidates for Manhattan Borough President. Our candidates tonight are State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal and City Council Member Keith Powers. Now, very briefly, the format for tonight is that each candidate will make a 1-minute opening statement, followed by a series of questions asked of both candidates from the 5 co-sponsoring groups. Those questions will have a 1-minute time limit. Each group will then ask a question from the public, either one submitted tonight via the Q&A, so you can submit those questions at any time using the Q&A function, or which the groups have received previously. That will be followed by a 1-minute closing statement from the candidates, and we're aiming to wrap up by about 7 p.m. or so. Tonight's forum will be recorded and shared with all who are registered, placed on Village Preservation's website and YouTube page, and all of the co-sponsoring organizations will also be sharing it. Just a note, the co-sponsors of tonight's forum are 501c3 organizations, which means we cannot and will not be endorsing candidates. But we can ask candidates to provide information about their records, perspectives, and plans on issues of import to us, and allow you to hear their responses and use that information as you will. We hope that you will find this as a good opportunity to learn more about the candidates, their records, and what they stand for. Now, if you have any technical issues tonight, please just email rsvp@villagepreservation.org. And if it hasn't already, that email address has been placed in the chat, which has otherwise been disabled. So I'm going to ask the candidates to turn their cameras on, and we will get started. And William, you can take down the opening slide. Great. All right, so we'll first start with 1-minute opening statements, and we'll do closing statements in reverse order. We will start with State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to all the organizations with whom I've worked over the years as state senator for the West Side. I represent the West Side of Manhattan, from Christopher Street, home of the historic Stonewall Inn, birthplace of the contemporary LGBTQ human rights movement, all the way up to West 103rd, or as my team likes to say, from the gay bars to Zay bars. And it's a historic neighborhood in so many respects, and one that I want to share with my daughters, and I hope my daughters' future. There is a natural tension now between preservation and the need to build more housing in New York City. We can overcome it. I believe strongly in the power of our local community boards to play an important role in that regard. I cut my teeth. My first organizing activity as a new New Yorker over 30 years ago was fighting to save the Edgar Allan Poe House at NYU. And I took a lot of lessons from that fight. One, which is you have to engage the local community and local community boards. And two, you got to fight what you believe in. And clearly, that was a cause that was noble and an effort that we need to continue throughout the entire borough. Let me say, in my career, I have just recently fought to save a historic landmark on the Upper West Side, the Metro Theater. And that's an example of adaptive reuse that I think preservationists and those who want and need to build more can take to heart. That was with state funding that I helped provide along with our governor and local assembly member. And it's something I'd like to replicate elsewhere, whether it's in the meatpacking district, in Lower Manhattan, in Inwood, or on the Upper East Side. We as preservationists and those who want to see New York City have our work cut out for us. But I think my record shows that I'm up to the challenge, and I look forward to your questions and comments tonight. And also wanted to thank my colleague, Keith Powers, for his participation. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brad. Going to pause you there. I had a little trouble with my timer, so Keith will also give you a little
It was
extra.
confusing. I didn't know it was counting up or down.
Well, hopefully I can get this worked out. But Keith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Senator. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I'm City Councilmember Keith Powers. I want to thank all our amazing organizations here. Many I've had the chance to work with along the way for putting this forum together, and people that are really committed to the future of Manhattan. I always say we're in this fight together, and we're all trying to fight for a better run, a more affordable and a safer city, and that starts with Manhattan. I'm, of course, looking forward here today to have a conversation about how we can use the Borough President's Office for better planning, for preservation, and how to talk about development here in the borough. And a centerpiece to that is to make sure that the Borough President is always there to listen and to work alongside the community about these issues, because we all have a goal here to make it a better place to live for all. And in my campaign, I've made affordability and quality of life the centerpiece of my entire campaign. And it's why I'm running for borough president, because I think that New Yorkers right now are really looking for experience and a vision for a better city. And I think I provide both of those. What I've always promised is that I would stand up for my neighbors. I'm a lifelong resident here in Manhattan, born and raised here in Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village, where I am sitting here today. Have the best tenants association, in my view, in New York City, and have been lucky enough to work alongside them on many of the victories here locally and in nearby neighborhoods to make sure that senior citizens or other people facing displacement have a voice and have support here as well.
Right.
So very eager to talk about what's ahead, and grateful for you guys giving us an opportunity to do that.
Great. Thank you so much. Hopefully I can get this timer fixed. But in the meantime, so the first questions are actually from friends of the Upper East Side, which they could not be here tonight, but they asked me to ask their questions for them. So each candidate will get 1 minute to respond, and I will be enforcing that. And the first one is just very general. I'm going to start with State Senator Hoylman Siegel, and then we'll go to Councilmember Powers. Tell us your record supporting historic preservation.
Well, my record stretches back to my earliest days as an activist, helping launch the campaign to try to save the Edgar Allan Poe House from its destruction by NYU's expansion. And I carried through that project as a member of Community Board 2 in the village, where preservation was always top of mind, including the fight around St. Vincent's Hospital, which we lost. That hospital left, but we saved in the process an incredibly important mid-century modernist building, which is now the home of the Lenox Hill emergency room. And to me, that's another example of adaptive reuse and how preservation can be a friend to economic growth and progress. And I think we've seen that at the Metro Theater on the Upper West Side, where just last week we announced a huge state support. And I'll continue to do that, making sure that historic preservation goes hand in hand with affordable housing and making certain that we grow our economy.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Same question to you, Keith. Tell us your record supporting historic preservation.
Thank you. And shout out to the Friends of the Upper East Side, who I've had a great fortune to be able to work with over the last few years. Look, our goal with Friends of the Upper East Side and other organizations is to make sure I'm very lucky and fortunate to represent so many iconic places in this city on the Upper East Side and beyond that, to have a district that adds and contributes to so much of the historical and cultural fabric of the city, and to really vibrant, strong neighborhoods. And that includes Carnegie Hill and the Upper East Side. And we have also fought together to make sure that as we're building and growing here as a city, that we also make sure we have the community's voices as part of that process, to make sure that we are fighting for sensible policies here. And on a number of occasions, making sure that when there is a need to push something over the goal line, that we have a strong and vibrant community and elected officials who are able to do that. Make sure that we preserve those spaces as really high quality places where quality of life is top of mind, and make sure the Landmarks Preservation Commission is also, by the way, funded and resourced to do the work that they need to do, which I think we don't
Right.
talk about enough.
Great. All right. I'm going to be a little stricter about enforcing
Sorry
the
about
time. The second question is, what would you do? And this time we're going to start with you, Keith.
Yeah.
What would you do as borough president to help support and promote recognition and preservation of historic sites and landmarks in our borough?
Sure. Number one is, like I said, we actually should start by talking about city budgets because our agencies are underfunded, can't do the work, don't have enough resources right now. So in the council, I've talked about that, but certainly as borough president, we continue that work to make sure people doing the work in the ground feel like they have the agency and support to do that. Second is always, if we have really good, high quality sites that deserve it, we need to push to make sure that they get the recognition that they deserve, both historic districts themselves and also iconic sites that are individually worthy of that. So I'd be working with communities to find that. That doesn't have to just be reactive. We can proactively do that. We can talk with community boards. We can talk with the organizations on here to think about other sites that might merit that and be worthy of that. And then use our platform alongside the local elected officials to make sure that we do that. Plus all the other big goals we have in the city, make sure landmarking, make sure historic preservation is part of that conversation and left out of it.
Great. Thanks so much. Same question for you, Brad.
Well, thank you. I believe we need preservationists on our community boards, people who know what's important in their local neighborhoods. I'd also be interested in, of course, funding the Landmarks Preservation Commission so it can do its job, so it can conduct the appropriate inspections. But third, London has an amazing blue plaque program, and I think part of New York's shortfall when it comes to historic sites is we don't do enough placemaking and recognizing sites of famous, homes of famous authors and painters and activists. Local organizations do that very well, including yours, Andrew. But I think the city needs to take a greater role in recognizing what's important in front of us. Look, I think of the Stonewall Inn and the fact that, the Trump administration is, trying to remove transgender people from literally the history. New York City can fight back by making certain we recognize our local history in that regard.
Great. Okay. Switching gears a little bit, here's a somewhat more complicated question from friends. And this is about Northwell's proposed redevelopment of Lenox Hill Hospital, which would require a major upzoning to accommodate an oversized 436-foot tall tower on a narrow pedestrian-heavy Lexington Avenue. This plan would undermine long-standing and hard-won zoning protections designed to preserve the character of Park and Lexington Avenues and their low-rise mid-block corridors. While we, meaning Friends, recognize the hospital's need for modernization, we believe it can be achieved without jeopardizing the neighborhood's character and quality of life. Can we count on your support to demand a revised proposal that is closer to as of right and to ask Northwell to provide alternative approaches to the current proposal as well as alternatives to the project itself? So we're going to start with Brad on that one.
Well, thank you. That's an important issue to a lot of those neighbors. I've been in some hospital fights myself over the years, and I know how important it is to engage with local community members in that regard. I think the current plan doesn't make sense. And if I had a vote, which I do not now, and the project may be done by the time if I'm elected as borough president, but I would urge a rethink, and I would urge that the hospital and their team sit down with the neighborhood and try to hash through their differences and understand the impact that it's going to have on these side streets. I know this is in the council member's district, and I'm hopeful that he will reach that conclusion. I know he's got his work cut out for him, and wish him the best. And any way I can support that effort, I'm sure he'll let me know.
Great. Thank you. Keith, same question for you.
Yeah, thank you. And, we've been working at this since it was first proposed or even before it hit the Euler process for years now, trying to make a more sensible and a more contextual hospital there. And we've had some success so far. We've reduced the height there and changed some of the timelines and other dynamics there to bring it much closer in line with what the community is asking for. And deeply sensitive to those who are going to be living in a construction, who, are concerned about living in a construction zone for quite a long time. So we still have a lot of work to do to bring the size to a better place, to bring the construction timeline to a better place. While what the question acknowledges the need to invest in healthcare and make sure the hospital has a future here, and we're not working to close it. But we continue to working and talking with the neighbors, and have appreciated all their feedback to date and our working relationship. And yes, we have to keep working at it to make sure it's a best and better proposal.
All right, thank you. Here's the final question from friends, and we'll start with Keith. It's regarding affordable housing, and it says, we've seen a troubling trend in Yorkville where relatively affordable housing in historic tenement-style buildings is being torn down and replaced with luxury towers, like the 34 affordable units at 355 East 86th Street, now slated for demolition. Between 2007 and 2020, over 14,000 affordable units vanished from the Upper East Side. What is your position on this pattern of displacement, and how would you ensure that Yorkville doesn't become just another exclusive high-income neighborhood, losing its character and longtime residents in the process? What specific steps would you take to protect and expand truly affordable housing in our neighborhood? Council member. Ooh.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's obviously nearby, right out of my district, but nearby. Look, we are seeing a concerning trend across Manhattan, which is, as many of us are talking about, the need to invest in housing and to build more housing to drive affordability, that as we're trying to attain those goals, we also are losing many housing stock here, some of the things that you're mentioning. So we don't want to lose while we're trying to gain and try to build new housing, and obviously also want to protect many of those tenants that are in those buildings who many or should be having deep affordable apartments through rent regulation protections and so forth. Look, a lot of that today falls out of the purview because of as of right zoning here. But if brought to us, we would guarantee that we're fighting for deep affordable housing, and not just we need a lot of units, but also make sure that it is reaching income levels to help New Yorkers of all different income streams here. Of course, we want to have a more proactive planning in the borough as well. So as borough president would pledge to do that, to figure out how we might plan better here in the borough to protect all these types of buildings while we're trying to address our housing crisis.
Same question for you, Brett.
Yeah, well, it's always troubling when I see, mass gentrification in any part of Manhattan or the city. The same problems are being faced by our neighbors in Harlem. Harlem, historically Black population, is moving out because they can't afford to stay there. Look, I look at this issue through the eyes of my 14-year-old and my 7-year-old daughter. Are they going to be able to afford to live in New York City? The city can certainly be doing a lot more in that regard. When it comes to city-owned land, and I know that's not the case in Yorkville, but when it comes to city-owned land, the baseline discussion needs to be around 100% affordable. We should not be selling city or state-owned property to the highest bidder. We need to bring in nonprofit developers, and as frankly we did in the 1980s in the Koch administration. That needs to be our new way of thinking about building, but we do have to build more. And one of the things I want to do, Andrew, is create a Manhattan Tenants Union to organize tenants who are currently in rent-regulated apartments and those who are under the new regulations under good cause eviction. That should be borough-wide. Tenants need to know their rights.
All right. Thank you very much. So now we're going to move on to the City Club. So Layla, if you can turn your camera on, and I will ask you to ask the next question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you to Senator Holman Siegel and Councilmember Powers for attending. My first question is, New York City has added approximately 307,000 net new housing units over the past 2 decades, with a population growth of only 260,000 people in the same time frame. Yet, affordability remains elusive, to say the least. Do you believe that the production of market rate housing leads to affordability gains across income levels? And what concrete policies would you champion to ensure that true affordable housing is produced and preserved in Manhattan? Starting with you, Councilmember Powers.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Look, we do have to build more housing to address continued growth here in the city, and I think Manhattan does need to play a large role in that. It creates a downward pressure as well when there is so many people trying to live in the greatest city on earth, and there is a shortage of housing. So we need to remove some of that pressure by making sure we're adding housing, and I've always been clear and consistent about that. But we also have to make sure there are tools for preservation. The deal I did in Waterside Plaza, I think, is a fantastic model to make sure we can help out tenants to reduce their rents who are longstanding tenants exiting an affordable housing program. Continue to use litigated powers, legislative powers to protect, or affordable housing power, budgetary powers to preserve housing that's already in place. What, like the senator said, using public land to be able to drive affordable housing in this borough at a significant rate. But yes, I think we have to use all the different tools that are in our toolbox to help reduce rents and add more opportunity.
Great, thank you. 1 minute on the mark. Same question to you, Senator Holman Siegel.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm an adherent of trickle-down economics in any forum, housing or otherwise. That said, we have to build housing of all types, Layla, but we need to understand that there is this affordability crisis and that people are being priced out of Manhattan, whether they're in Yorkville or in Harlem. And one way to do it is to engage the state and city in building affordable housing. We did it in the 80s. We did it in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s. We had Mitchell Lama, but we seem to be out of ideas in that regard. We need to use the city and state's bonding authority to subsidize the construction of affordable housing, partnering with nonprofit developers. That's how Penn South got developed. That's how Manhattan Plaza and Westbeth for Artists was partially developed. We've got a lot of potential in the city and state's borrowing authority. We should use it.
Thank you. The next question is about community boards. Last year, it came to light that multiple appointees to Manhattan community boards were affiliated with a lobbying organization, raising concerns about the integrity and independence of the boards. Do you believe that community boards should be insulated from lobbying organization influence? And what specific reforms would you implement to ensure that the community board appointment process is transparent, equitable? We are going to start with you, Brad.
Well, I strongly believe in the power of community boards, having served on one for a decade, having been chair of Community Board 2 Manhattan for 3 terms. When I was community board chair, I joined the team of the new borough president back in the day, and we came up with the idea to have an independent screening panel to review the qualifications of community board applicants, but in a dispassionate way and through people, community groups, advocacy organizations, preservationists who could look at their credentials and make an assessment. I think we should consider that model, and I'd like to return to it. I don't think the staff of elected officials, for example, are appropriate to be on community boards. Look, if you're a member of an advocacy organization, I think, that's fine. Paid lobbyists kind of, always make me pause. But I think it's about the pecuniary interest of an individual and whether they actually have a vested interest in issues before a board that should be most concerned about.
Thank you. Thank you. Same question to you, Keith.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Look, my goal is to have a diverse and balanced set of community boards. It is okay to disagree. It is okay to have different opinions on a number of these issues, but it's essential and important is that we have a good place for people to bring their best ideas and to serve our borough. Term limits is also coming, so that is going to mean that we are going to have to do a heavy task here of recruiting a whole lot of people. We don't want to lose the expertise of many people who have contributed a lot to those boards. So number one, just similar, I absolutely would commit to a independent merit-based screening process that I think would draw out the best people, but also make sure to bring in voices from different neighborhoods to make sure we have diverse boards, we have different generations being represented on our board. Two is to train our members. I'd love to bring some members who are currently on the boards into a process where they could help train the new members at term limits, and to also to affirmatively, as borough president, support and train them and support them so that we have the best community boards in the city, which we already do, and we should continue that.
Thank you. Great. Okay, the next question is about casinos. As Manhattan Borough President, you will hold a seat on the Community Advisory Committee, the CAC, reviewing casino proposals for sites in Manhattan, including Hudson Yards, Times Square, and the East Side. Do you support or do you oppose the siting of a casino in Manhattan? And how would you vote on these proposals if or when seated on the CAC? Can you please explain your position in terms of economic, social, and land use impacts? Starting with you, Keith.
Yeah, thank you. Look, to the last part, like, of course, we know there's a potential economic boost to the city and lots of jobs that are associated with that. And that's why I think this conversation is happening here. And what I've said along the way that well, first of all, I should mention, like, I think some of the CACs will probably occur and happen before we are, sitting in the borough president's office. But what I've said sort of consistently is that projects moving through that process need to demonstrate clear, consistent, and strong community support and offer tangible, substantive community benefits that would improve the lives of people in Manhattan, and to demonstrate that they are an additive feature to this Bureau of the City. And there's a lot of proposals outside of obviously Manhattan that will be doing that as well. So while I don't know that we will be there affirmatively as the borough president, and of course we both have roles otherwise, those are the clear and outlined criteria, and we are going to be watching to see if any of those meet that criteria. Sorry, Andrew Berman is stopping me.
Thank you. Brad, same question.
Yeah, I'm going to be straight up with you, Layla. I'm opposed to casinos. End of story. But I recognize that there are job benefits, good union, jobs included. But there's a really good location in Queens that has community support, and I think that's what we need to understand, that this is about whether a community wants a casino or not whether it's imposed on a local community because the civic elders think otherwise. And that's why we have a community advisory committee. That's why we passed legislation in Albany to make certain that was part of it. So I think there are a lot of proposals out there for casinos in Manhattan. I haven't had a constituent, a voting, living, breathing member of Manhattan come up to me, grab me by the lapels and say, Senator Hoylman-Siegel, we need a casino in my neighborhood. I don't think it's going to happen.
Thank you. My final question has to do with NYCHA. Last week, NYCHA Reese houses on the Lower East Side voted overwhelmingly to reject a RAD Pact conversion. What is your position on RAD Pact conversions underway at NYCHA developments, including the proposed demolition and redevelopment of Fulton, Elliott, Chelsea houses? Do you support or oppose demolition of public housing, generally speaking? Starting with you, Brad.
Thank you. This is a complicated issue, as you well know, Layla, and one that I've been engaged with my local council member. We need to preserve and protect NYCHA. The problem is, of course, that there's no money coming from the federal government, and there's just drips and drabs coming from the city and state. As borough president, I'm going to advocate and continue to fight for a dedicated revenue stream from the city and state for public housing. That's number one. Number two, there are opportunities at RAD Pacts across proposals across the borough and across the city. But I think tenants need to be fully consulted on whether they want to proceed with a RAD Pact. To me, that's the most important thing, is that tenants who live there, paying tenants who have a right to participate in the engagement of a RAD Pact, have a say and a seat at the table.
Thank you. Keith, same question.
Sure. Yeah, look, number one, I'll say, like, my position is that if the tenants are in support of it, that I would support them on that. And there are going to be instances where they're not. And I do not want to plan force down them that does not serve their needs in their communities. So for me, it's really, really important, just like where I live, that the tenants are behind something, that we provide them the support. And if they're not, that we stand with them. That's like how I want my community to be treated. I will add, I've been knocking on NYCHA doors throughout this borough constantly. And we have a lot of work to do to make sure we improve the living conditions in them. We improve public safety measures, doors that don't lock, conditions that no one here would want to live on. We do need a citywide and borough-wide strategy to start funding the capital plan of NYCHA at a much greater scale. That is going to be a major focus of mine as borough president. It is unfair to see what the conditions are in many of these apartments, and the tenants want just what we want. They want basic quality of life here. So I'm firmly stand with them.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Layla. Now we're going to hear from Frampton Talbert and the Historic Districts Council. So Frampton, if you can.
I'm here. Thank you both for being here and your support. First question for Brad. So as Dan Garodnick, Chair of City Planning, has said, 90% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 have already been built. So if we can productively put them to use, it's a win for the city and the environment. And we also know that 40% of the buildings in Manhattan could not be built today because they are overbuilt or don't conform to zoning. Yet we continue to see the demolition of reusable historic buildings like the Hotel Pennsylvania as just one example. How would you incentivize and prioritize adaptive reuse of existing historic buildings for housing? Brett.
Well, it's a wonderful question. I think we have a great opportunity then for upcoming Midtown East rezoning proposal, which the next borough president is going to play a key role. There are a lot of historic buildings worthy of preservation and adaptive reuse, commercial buildings that can be adapted to housing. One of the things I want to look at is how to make that easier, because I've heard from landlords that their existing commercial buildings, face a lot of hurdles to be converted. One thing we have to look at is the use of interior windows rather than abiding by a law that I think dates from the 1870s that requires every bedroom to have an exterior window. We can make changes like that in our zoning law to get the pipeline of conversions from commercial to residential moving more quickly. It's an expensive process, but if we cut through some of the red tape, make some of the changes in the conversion process, we can do that. The other thing is historic tax credits need to be fully utilized.
Same question, Keith.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. Look, I have been championing the conversion here in Midtown South, which would allow our office buildings to convert to housing to solve multiple needs here. And we're working with Councilmember Bottcher and Borough President Levine on that rezoning round. Part of that is making sure that buildings and places that are deemed worthy of preservation get that as part of this process. And then we are able to move many of these underutilized buildings into housing, which would severely help that neighborhood and make sure we boost our stock of affordable housing in there. We have a minimum of 25% affordable, and we're looking at ways to do much more. In Midtown East, in my district, we are seeing a boom of new buildings that are converting to, of buildings that are now converting to housing too. We have to stand out of the way. We have to try to accelerate as much as we can and continue to push the focus at. It's a really good way to solve our housing crisis here in the city.
Thank you so much. I think you both touched on Midtown South, so I'm going to rephrase this question a little bit more to dig into that. So, we have concerns at HDC and other preservation groups about the current proposal, which includes raising the residential FAR cap to 18, not including incentives for existing manufacturing, which we think will push out the rest of the garment district jobs. And we want the Landmarks Commission to preserve our historic resources before the rezoning takes place. Can you talk a little bit more about your position on the Midtown South rezoning as it stands? Keith.
Sure. We are in the early stages. The community boards both just submitted their recommendations, and CB4 and CB5 I thought were thorough and thoughtful about how they approached that. We're now headed off over to the borough president and the borough board to weigh in on those. And I think looking at many of the issues they attended to, plus more open space and public realm improvements, plus looking at other ways that we can accommodate the public realm and other needs in that area. We don't just want to, I've been big support of the plan, but I also want to make sure that we attend to all the different needs and view this as a big opportunity to attend to many of the things the community are talking about there. But it's really important we get this done. I think it's a really important conversion and part of the city's housing plan that has tremendous upside, but we have to use it as the opportunity to get those other improvements as well. And of course, look at sites that might be good sites for historic preservation and lean into that as well.
Thank you. Same question, Brad.
Yeah, you know, the borough president is really, the question is, how's the borough president going to play a role in this? And the borough president has great convening authority when it comes to rezonings. And I remember almost every stale donut and lukewarm cup of coffee I had in Gail Brewer's conference room, where she hashed out a solution to the Garment District rezoning issue. I think we need to go back to that practice of convening stakeholders and hammering out agreements. It's something I'm extremely committed to. I'm proud to have the support of Gail Brewer and two other former borough presidents, including Ruth Messinger and C. Virginia Fields, who also used their power in that regard. You know, the current borough president has done a wonderful job in identifying sites of housing, over 70,000 throughout the borough, that I would like to build on as the next borough president. But it's really about consultation with the stakeholders and understanding the possibility that can come through conversation.
Thank you so much. Next question. Vulnerable buildings. In the preservation community, we are seeing an increasing number of historic landmark designated buildings being demolished due to years of neglect, malice, and unsafe work. I know some of these have happened in both your districts. And wondering what you would do to reverse this trend. And we'll start with Brad.
Well, I think demolition by neglect is appalling. And, you know, we need to strengthen fines and sanctions and enforcement. Of course, that comes through funding the LPC appropriately so they can do their job that they're designated to undertake. What's the point of having a historic district or a historic building if we're not going to look after it and preserve it for future generations? You know, I was just so heartsick when in the middle of the night, the developers went into the building that housed the last Frank Lloyd Wright interior in New York City and tore it out under the dark of night. That's outrageous. I spoke out about it then, but we needed to find the hell out of those perpetrators of destruction of our city and state's historic past.
Thank you. Keith.
Yeah, look, I mean, sometimes we've seen the different agencies, landmarks, and past examples, Department of Buildings and others being sort of miscommunicating and not being able to have. I think we saw an example in Bed-Stuy where that happened, and there was a deep miscommunication between agencies. That's a major problem, and borough president role has to step in to help fix that. Look, I think the point of landmarking is to preserve buildings. So, you know, trying to have a preventative strategy or to allow them is something we may have to look at ourselves as an update. It should be preventative from that happening in the first place. I think most New Yorkers, the point of the landmarking.
Thank you. And my final question, and we'll start with Keith, is we are concerned that some of the initial proposals coming out of the Charter Revision Commission to lessen or eliminate community board, borough president, and council member involvement in our land use processes, like ULURP. Do you support the current process that allows the borough president and community boards to have an advisory role in ULURP, or how would you change that?
Well, look, I'm first. Look, one thing is I do think it'd be interesting to give the borough president more affirmative power to initiate actions and land use actions in a way. I mean, Community Board 6, which I was on, we were working on a 197A plan, as many other boards have, and they tend to go on for a long time and not really get empowered or passed at the end of the day. So thinking about way the borough president's powers themselves could be updated to not just make it so that city planning or a private actor can move forward rezoning actions, would I think put some more power back in the hands of all of us here in the borough. So I think that's definitely a starting point here to make sure that the borough president has more action, and then we can work with folks in the borough to look ways to move forward actions that we like. It also would give us more power in specific scenarios to really ourselves dream up what the scenarios that we want to see and be able to move it ourselves. That's one thought, an idea.
Great, thank you. And Brad, your response.
Well, I think we need to strengthen the professional expertise lent to community boards. You know, I remember before we had community board term limits, Doris Deether on community board too. I mean, she was a wealth of information that frankly I and others learned from. But you know, now with term limits, we don't have those longtime members and they're rotating off, which I think is a sad thing for community boards. That said, I love the idea of planners being able to assist community boards. And I want a real estate financial analyst hired by the borough president to advise our 12 community boards in Manhattan when they look at a ULURP and understand when a developer says, oh, I can only build so much affordable housing. You know, we need to double check their math when it comes to that. And that's what I would do as borough president. And when it comes to the diversity of members on the board, you know, we need to make sure that we have members of organized labor on community boards. We need to have, you know, public employees on community boards. We need to have preservationists on community boards. An independent screening panel can hopefully make that happen.
Great, thank you again so much, both of you.
And thank you, Frampton. Now we're going to hear from Peg Breen and the New York Landmarks Conservancy. So Peg, if you can join and ask the first question.
Yes, thank you. The Midtown South proposal upzones a portion of an historic district, and this follows, of course, the upzoning of the Soho-NoHo historic districts. Do you support upzoning historic districts? And if so, why? Keith?
Look, at the Midtown South, there's basically 4 parcels there. So we're looking at all of them in different ways, both the economics of the you know, the economic sort of opportunities within that, whether you talk about the different industries. We're looking at the historic nature of them, and we're looking at what they look and feel like at the end of the day. So it's one big proposal, but there are 4 parcels in there, and there are going to be needs and opportunities in there to accommodate more housing. So I wouldn't say in that there's going to be an across the board no in Midtown South on that. I'm just candid about that, but there are going to be opportunities to look at exactly what's appropriate there. And as we spoke earlier, it's a big opportunity with a lot of needs to continue to attend to. And we are starting that process now as it makes its way to the borough president, then city planning, and finally with the council members. And we're hyper focused on making sure that.
So we're almost done, but is that a yes? You support upzoning historic districts?
In Midtown South, I think there is potentially an opportunity and need to do that in some places.
Brad?
Yes, well, my answer would be it depends on the neighborhood. I think there are areas in Midtown South where upzoning would be appropriate. Look, we have a housing and affordability crisis, but we need to do it with context. We need to do it in consultation. We need to do it as convening members and stakeholders of community boards and businesses and garment center, advocates to ensure that that happens in a way that is sensitive, but also points to growth and housing, which the city is desperately, in need of. So the answer is yes, but the context, Peg, matters most of all. And as borough president, I'd be the person charged with making certain we get to a position that the community, including all stakeholders, can agree on.
And historic districts and individual landmarks cover only some 5% of the city's land, although it's a larger portion in Manhattan. And some people are blaming historic districts for the lack of affordable housing. Do you blame historic districts for the lack of affordable housing? Or do you agree that historic districts protect the city's character, economy, and quality of life? Brad?
Well, I think that people use, different arguments depending on their point of view. I certainly wouldn't blame a historic district for anything other than ensuring that we have the placemaking and understanding of our history and the neighborhood that I think is what makes New York City great. That said, if you have a historic district, you should protect it. That's why we have them in the first place. So, it's interesting. There's this pendulum swinging back and forth. Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses, Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses. And, I'm still in the Jane Jacobs camp and really believe that having an enlivened streetscape with buildings in scale, different incomes, mixed use is the future. And it's a community in which I want to live.
Keith?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I don't blame it for the affordable housing issues in the city. A lot of sort of parts of that equation. That's why when I talk about we have areas that might be like in Midtown, whether it's Midtown East, just some of the convergence happening there, in Midtown South, that we do have to think about those a bit differently because they are areas that I think can accommodate growth and are a big part of the housing equation here. It's also why I also believe other areas of the city, as we've talked about, need to also be accommodating more growth and not shutting themselves out of the conversation. So I think there are opportunities in areas where we should be doing a lot of this and not trying to put these things in combat with each other. There's a place for all, and finding that balance is a really important part. I think that's part of what the borough president's job is.
Governor Hochul recently announced that she would not allow Amtrak to demolish the block south of Penn Station, and that she did not see the need for a proposed $17 billion underground station for New Jersey Transit that is proposed to go under that block. Do you agree with the governor? Keith?
Look, I think that like the assembly member over there has put out a proposal to really focus on housing there. I think that is a thoughtful proposal because it's just tying into everything else I said. There are areas where we really do need to build good housing around there, and I think we should be leaning into that. I think that should be the starting point of our conversation in around that area. And obviously Penn Station itself needs the upgrades, and any of us who ride through that or walk through it can see the need for that. But I like to focus on residential character in that neighborhood. It would be a nice attachment to what we're doing in Midtown South to improve the entire quality of life and streetscape there.
Just to be clear, there are homes and affordable homes on that block, as well as landmark quality buildings. Brad?
Yes, I agree with the governor. I welcome her change of heart if that's what it was. I think that Gateway, an important project, economic development, the commute from New Jersey, I get it, jobs coming in, but it would seem totally unnecessary to destroy an entire block. Yes, there are historic buildings on that block, including a church. There are lofts, there are rent-regulated tenants, there are small businesses. Any place that we can avoid the wholesale demolition of an entire block, probably a good idea, and probably a lot easier than going through the review process. So there's a way to redirect the tracks underneath the current Penn Station. Look, the next borough president is going to be deeply engaged in the redevelopment of Penn Station and the area around it. That is the perfect place for new affordable housing. That needs to be the top priority, one of the top priorities for the next mayor and the incoming borough president.
Right. My final question is still at Penn Station. There's been at least some debate over designs for an upgraded Penn Station, but little talk about improving the transit. And you just mentioned improving through running at Penn Station. Amtrak trains go through Penn and go up and down the seaboard. New Jersey Transit and Long Island Railroad currently don't. Through running would allow them to, which would make transportation easier and have economic benefits. A lot of civic groups are calling for an independent assessment of through running to see if it can happen now, since Amtrak is so resistant to it. Would you support an independent review of through running to see if we could get better transit now? Brad?
100%. Through running is something we should not foreclose the possibility in any redevelopment plan. Look, we're talking about Penn Station. We're preservationists here, and we know that Penn Station is exhibit A of the short-sightedness that sometimes government and frankly New Yorkers have taken when it comes to grand historic structures and otherwise. Can you imagine if we had, Gateway going into historic Penn Station, how beautiful and wonderful that would be? Of course, we have, Moynihan Station. There was a plan for a terminal for Gateway. That was going to be 3 train stations, in the 3-block radius. It seems, a little unnecessary. So, but through running should be on the table. I strongly support it. I would help launch an independent review if I were borough president.
Great. Keith?
Yes, I do. And same thing. I think this is a great role for the borough president to play. It is about planning. It is about not just one neighborhood. It's about our entire city and region. And one of the roles that I think the borough president has to play deeply is thinking about the entire regional needs, of course, with the community sitting at the table. And I think that's something I've committed myself to. So the answer is yes, and I would be happy to help with that as borough president.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peg. I'm going to go now with questions from Village Preservation. So my first question is, under the Adams administration, new landmark designations have dropped to their lowest level of any mayor in the 60-year history of the commission. Do you think this is a problem? And if so, what, if anything, would you do as borough president to try to address this and get the Landmarks Preservation Commission to again engage vigorously in new landmark designations? And I will start with Keith.
Yeah, thank you. Look, we should be going out and reviewing and looking at sites that are worthy and have merit to be landmarked, and of course the historic districts as well. I think what the borough president can be doing is to spearheading that and to be pushing that forward and engaging in that conversation, bringing sites forward or bringing ideas forward. When we're talking about doing neighborhood rezonings like we're doing in Midtown South, also making sure there is a conversation about preservation in that as well, and that we're finding that good balance between what is new and comes on board and what is really worthy of preserving here. Again, another perfect role for the borough president to look at that, not just at one district over here, one district over there, but to look at the entire borough, think about proactively with our community boards and our preservation institutions about what has merit here, and to bring that to the next commissioner or the current commissioner of the Landmark Preservation Commission, and of course the mayor's office as well.
Thanks so much. Same question for you, Brad.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that we're not recognizing the history of New York City. And it's architectural history, but it's also about people who've lived in these buildings and worked and created and made the city and country what it is. And really, I want that future recognized by my daughters. And we won't do it, Andrew, unless we identify those buildings, those parcels, those neighborhoods that are worthy of preservation. And we need help. We need help from our community boards to do that. So I think, I'd like to replicate the model of a lot of the preservationists on this Zoom. Grassroots organizing from the bottom up, not top down. Help the borough president identify buildings worth saving, buildings worth marking as important to our city and state's history.
Thanks so much. Next question. What would your position be on the current city plans for a 60-story tower of mostly super luxury housing at Gansevoort Square, and to demolish the Tony D'Appolito Recreation Center, both on city-owned property in Greenwich Village? And we'll start with you, Brad.
Well, I mean, that plan sucks, to be blunt, but and it needs a complete reconfiguration. I'm sorry that the RFP went out without the community consultation that frankly was ignored. And I'm going to work closely with the council member there for a remassing that both provides the housing and the support to the Whitney Museum and the High Line. But it's just, it's basically a middle finger at the local community, and we need to rethink it. But it goes back to my earlier point about city and state-owned parcels and the need to start the conversation at 100% affordable. But in some cases, Andrew, it has to be acknowledged that, some market rate housing could actually contribute to more affordable housing. So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to work with the local community and listen to their opinions.
Thank you. Same question for you, Keith.
I actually knew Tony D'Appolino personally, and was a legend. So losing that recreation center is a personal would hurt a whole lot. And I hope they are able to keep it and repair it. And if we want to do something else alongside that, that's always, I think, always a possibility, an idea. But he was a family friend, so I want to make sure we always have a Tony D'Appolino recreation center in this city. Look, we do need housing. We all recognize that. We all understand that. Those proposals are about to hopefully go through a pretty vigorous exercise that would deliver a lot more housing, bring them into where the more skill in line with where the community wants it to be, and to be more thoughtful about it. So I know they all have to go through a lot of community input. What I've heard from colleagues is that they feel like it started without them. It went ahead of them. So I think getting a restart on that would be helpful. But I want to make sure we're not totally crushing proposals that could deliver housing here and make sensibility out of them.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, what's your position on the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, which would for the first time limit the jurisdiction of future landmark designations and supersede current zoning protections, allowing construction on landmark sites which might otherwise be prohibited, and allows significantly larger developments than local zoning allows, simply for including a small fraction of quote unquote affordable housing? And we'll start with you, Keith.
I support it. I do think there's a need for housing here. I'm not well in the weeds on the bill that's happening in the negotiations in Albany, but on a larger scale, I'm supportive of it, and I hope they can find a way to make it attentive to some of the concerns that you're raising. But hopefully, we can also find something that would move more housing here. I think there is a possibility to do that.
Thanks. And Brad?
Yeah, I support it as well up in Albany, but my reading of the bill is that historic places of worship are excluded, and if the bill doesn't say that, it needs to be explicit in that regard. That said, I've spoken to a lot of pastors and particularly in different parts of the borough, who frankly could use the revenue to keep their places of worship operational. But I'm fighting right now to save the West Park Presbyterian Church on the Upper West Side. So the block just south of Penn Station has a historic church. So churches, synagogues, and mosques, other places of worship are part of our communities, but we should be mindful that many cases the number of their attendees is declining, and they often do need support as well as the opportunity to build housing for New Yorkers.
All right. My final question. Do you believe that increasing the production of unaffordable market rate housing helps to make housing overall more affordable, as plans like City of Yes have been premised upon? And what is your position in general on upzonings that increase the allowable size of market rate residential developments? And we'll start with Brad.
Again, this is that classic supply side trickle down theory around housing. We need housing of all kinds, market and affordable, but we certainly need more affordable. I'm glad that we passed the protections around good cause eviction, which is why, Andrew, I want to create a Manhattan Tenants Union so that tenants who live in market rate housing and qualify understand their rights under our new law. I'll also say that it's important that we look to upzone, but at the same time, historic districts should be protected. That's why we excluded historic districts from the law that we passed in Albany to increase the FAR across Manhattan and the other boroughs.
Thank you. All right, and the last group questions are going to come from Andrea Goldwyn. Andrea is from the New York Landmarks Conservancy, but she's asking the questions from Landmark West, who could not be here tonight.
Great, thank you.
I think Keith didn't answer that last question. Am I wrong?
Oh, is that right? I'm sorry, Keith.
Sure.
Andrea,
Just restate it for me one more time.
Sure. So the question was
About market-based housing, I think, right? And
do you believe that increasing the production of unaffordable market rate housing helps to make housing overall more affordable?
Look, I think adding more housing takes pressure off of people today when there is a really high demand for housing in New York City, especially Manhattan. There are people who are living in it, and a high demand does help create a real pressure on them. But it's not the silver bullet across the board. We need to do a lot of different things to help create the housing that New Yorkers need. And when we talk about City of Yes, like people can like it or not like it, but there were provisions in there that added density, came with some affordable housing production as well. So we want to make sure that there is affordable housing being matched alongside other housing being created here, and we can strengthen those types of protections and programs. But we need to do a lot of things. I'm not saying that as like a catch-all. I'm saying that it is really the truth. But adding new housing online as well does create pressure off of existing tenants from feeling like there are Hunger Games when it comes to looking for an apartment in New York City. And I think young people particularly are feeling that squeeze in a really deep way right now.
Thank you, and apologies for skipping over you there.
Okay.
Andrea, so we are now going to go to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is a great segue. These are the questions from Landmark West. And the first one is, throughout the City of Yes review, we heard a lot about how all neighborhoods need to do their part to solve the housing crisis. Manhattan has the two densest neighborhoods in North America, the Upper East and Upper West sides. What would you quantify as doing their part? And is there such a thing as a neighborhood being too dense? Keith.
Yeah, conceptually, is there an answer for being too dense? Of course. But I think what we're talking about is not really just about Manhattan. It's about a 5-borough plan to make sure we are opening and accessing neighborhoods where long-time production of housing has been pretty stagnant. We're not getting new housing at all. We're not getting affordable housing, and making this a 5-borough strategy for increasing opportunities to good neighborhoods. Because right now, just like I was saying about the housing, the neighborhoods are getting stressed out with high demand coming in from all the cities. So we need to open more opportunities to every single neighborhood. I think that was a big part of what City of Yes was about, is 5 boroughs contributing in a modest way to new growth and trying to attend to different sort of concerns here. And I just would note in my district, Community Board 6 was fully in support of it. Community Board 8, Community Board 5 had registered support for it, nuanced support for it. So on my community boards, we had, more support for that I think you saw in other places. And yeah, good.
Sure. Yes. I mean, density is a blessing, but it's also, it's also can be a curse if there's too much density in a neighborhood. That said, it is really one of the things that makes New York a place where people want to live, because there is an abundance of opportunity, but we have to build on that, yet be mindful of, neighborhoods that where the character isn't appropriate. So it's really about that, Andrea, bringing neighborhoods together, bringing community boards and stakeholders together to discuss what's appropriate in a neighborhood, what works. And it's not one size fits all for every borough. It's certainly not the case for Manhattan and its many neighborhoods. That's why utilizing community boards and convening them project by project is so important.
Great, thank you. Next question. There are several landmark-worthy sites that New York State has deemed eligible, but the city's Landmarks Commission will not designate. Lincoln Center is a case in point. Would you advocate for greater landmarking protections for a site like Lincoln Center, which is internationally renowned but has no legal oversight against inappropriate alteration or demolition? Brad.
Yes. God, I hope nobody's planning to build a casino in Lincoln Center. And, I'll tell you that it's kind of that, that mid-century modern architecture that is really at this point the stepchild of city and state government, in this case, not the state. And we need to recognize its beauty, its importance, its, the way it captures people's imagination. So we should push for Lincoln Center to be designated. And I'm really glad that the state has, and frankly surprised that the state has stepped up where the city has it. I think it also speaks to the fecklessness of the current LPC and the fact that it's underfunded, understaffed, and does not have the leadership that I think it deserves.
Great, Keith.
I mean, I was surprised to find out that Lincoln Center is not landmarked. I think every New Yorker would have assumed that, like many of our other cultural institutions and important places. So, I mean, I'd love to talk to them about it and hear their thoughts on it. But yes, I think it is worthy of a designation. And there are other sites I'm certain that meet that criteria as well that have not achieved that. So I would be happy to look at the state's designations as well and see where we might be able to put some others into that mix as well. So I think it was a two-part question, but I will say for sure Lincoln Center feels like a place that should be preserved. I'm surprised to even know that's not the case.
Great, thank you. Next question. New York's parkland is supposed to be protected. In recent years, the Museum of Natural History completed an expansion. The Met is about to embark on one. Lincoln Center is hoping to develop Damrosch Park to better suit its performance agenda. Altogether, these actions develop open space, which doesn't have FAR. They privatize public space, and they limit opportunities for the recreation that was initially envisioned. As Borough President, how will you ensure that our precious parkland is respected and protected? Keith.
Sure. Look, I also would also add, I think some of those institutions are extremely significant to the city, and some of their enhancements to them are good and important. And I'll be candid about that. With that being said, what they do have to go through a process where of a community engagement, like the Met as the part you're talking about right now, has to go through a big, robust community engagement process, plus the landmarks process, and of course, working with the Central Park Conservancy and neighbors to make sure it fits into the picture of Central Park. It doesn't overburden it. So that's what I would be looking for, making sure they don't overburden or take up significant amount of new space, that they are fitting in and contextual. But I also do want those institutions to feel like their support when they want to make good enhancements that would be additive to both the city and the entire city's tourism system here and drive people into those places.
Thank you. Brad.
Well, we all know as Manhattanites, we have precious little open space. The Met proposal, on the other hand, doesn't take up any more park space than it currently occupies under its existing building. It does change some of the sky plane, as I understand it. It seems like a good plan from my vantage point. I'm very supportive of cultural institutions, and I think the borough president needs to be a champion of arts and culture, especially since Washington's, cutting our legs out from under us in that regard. But we have to fight for open space. And look, let's talk about Elizabeth Street Garden and how sad that we're going to lose a community's, backyard, a place of respite and solace, and where New Yorkers can kind of get away from, the din of daily existence and, think peacefully. So we have to be mindful of the importance to our mental health of open space.
All right, last question from Landmark West. For generations, zoning was intended to be a limit, which offered residents predictability. In recent years, the Department of City Planning has shifted to a housing everywhere and anywhere approach. But a mix of uses makes for a vibrant community. As large employers like Walt Disney leave their campus, it's turning residential. What do you see as the role of the city planning department and of zoning in New York City going forward? And that was to Brad.
Well, the Disney campus is one where we have been able to capitalize on moving a headquarters from a primarily residential neighborhood to maybe a neighborhood where it's more suitable in lower Manhattan. And I think it's a great opportunity for housing on the Upper West Side, which is sorely needed. I think city planning needs to play a key role. I happen to be longtime friends, as is the council member of this current city planning commissioner, Dan Grodnick, who I think has done a terrific job, for the record, as someone who understands community boards and understands the city council and the limitations of each, and the need to put a vision forward and then consult with stakeholders. And that's part of the borough president's job and one that I would engage in very actively.
All right, back to Keith.
Can you just repeat the question? Sorry. It's about the role of the
Sure.
borough. Yeah.
Yeah. So for generations, zoning was intended to be a limit which offered residents predictability. In recent years, city planning has shifted to a housing anywhere, everywhere approach. A mix of uses makes a vibrant community, yet when large employers like Walt Disney leave, their campus is turning residential. What do you see as the role of the city planning department and zoning in New York City going forward?
Sure, like you're right, zoning offers predictability and it offers everyone predictability, communities, the predictability of what their neighborhood will be like and what should be in that area, the predictability of people who are looking to build and do something, to have some expectations about what is the use groups there and what should be allowed there. I want housing. I want more housing in the city. I'm never going to shy away from that. But the zoning is the sort of way to attend to a lot of that and to offer some clear lines of sight for everyone that's involved. You asked about the role of the city planning. I want to start with the role of the borough president. The role of the borough president is to attend to those zoning issues here, to look at the whole borough. And I agree with you. I think those mixed uses really do add a lot of value to our neighborhoods. And our different neighborhoods, we are still a borough of neighborhoods. Those different neighborhoods make us like a great borough and make it so that we really have a good sorting out of different uses here. So the borough president has to look at that big picture and also be careful that we do that in a really careful and thoughtful way. And then we also bring city planning in to do the same.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. I know we're running really tight on time. We did want to get to a couple of quick questions from the public. So I'm going to hit you with one very quickly. I'm just going to give you 20 seconds at most. And that is, as Manhattan Borough President, you would get to appoint somebody to the City Planning Commission. Who would you appoint? And if you can't offer a name, what sort of person would that be? And I'll start with Keith. 20 seconds.
I don't have a name, but look, I think somebody who's really thoughtful about the large picture here in the city, somebody who understands the challenges that tenants are going through and what communities are going through, sometimes feeling disempowered in the process of going through these like sort of cumbersome process and complicated processes. But somebody, oh, sorry, 20 seconds. Okay. Thoughtful and considerate is my
Brad?
Boy, I'd like to see a tenant on the City Planning Commission, somebody who understands the pressures of living in rent-regulated apartment, who deals with a landlord who is experiencing the affordability crisis that so many politicians talk about, but need to be represented at the table.
Peg, I'm going to ask you to turn your camera on and ask your question from the public quickly.
Sure. This person wants to know whatever happened to community-led planning. There was always a complaint that if a community went through its own planning process, city planning usually rejected it anyway. But we seem to be moving far away from any community-based planning. Can you bring some back?
Does that
Start with Brad.
I love these community-led plans, and we've had different variations of them on the West Side, particularly in Chelsea 25 years ago, and frankly, it was a big success, and should serve as a blueprint for future efforts. That ability to lead a community plan is still in existence. It requires funding and expertise, something that I'm committed to providing as borough president.
Pause you there, and 30 seconds for Keith as well.
Sure. Well, first of all, I've started. If you think we should have a city planning commissioner who is a tenant and who will be strong on rent-regulated issues and lives in a rent-regulated apartment, I am your borough president. But kidding aside, I gave a proposal earlier. I think the borough president could do a proactive way of bringing forward applications and bringing forward land use actions that would help drive the community's input in this process.
Right. Frampton, I'll ask you to ask the next very quick 20-second question.
Sure. Quick question. This goes back to the first question we had. What do you see as the borough president's role in hospitals in Manhattan, given the expansion of some hospitals that we talked about at the beginning, as well as closing hospitals like Mount Sinai, Beth Israel in downtown Manhattan, leaving a dearth of healthcare? I'll start with Keith.
Sure, we have to stop these hospital closures from happening. We need to, I live across the street from Beth Israel. That is my hospital, that's my neighbor's hospital. We need to stop these closures from happening. Was proud to join many in the fight to stop it. And we need to be building out our public infrastructure and healthcare, and the borough president should be looking to do that and focused on that, not letting hospitals close on our watch.
Great.
Brad?
When are we going to learn our lesson, Frampton, that we need more hospital beds, not fewer, given the recent experience of the pandemic? We had to create a whole, triage system in Central Park. We seem to have forgotten it, but there are issues. One of them is the state agency that manages the opening and closure of hospitals doesn't have enough representation from the public on its board, and I've passed legislation to change that, but the borough president needs to be actively engaged and fight hospital closures tooth and nail.
Great. And the last question is going to come from Layla. Layla, if you want to ask a quick 20-second question to each of the candidates.
Sure. As borough president, you will have the ability to hold hearings. What is the first hearing you will hold, starting with you, Keith?
I talked about NYCHA earlier. One of them would definitely be about the plight of NYCHA tenants here and ways that the borough president's office can help lift up and support and invest and get capital funding for our public housing tenants who really need our support.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. There are so many issues, Layla. I would say, the future of Penn Station is kind of at the center of New York's future infrastructure. There's so many open issues. The borough president can play a big role, that convening role of stakeholders and experts and elected officials to get a plan underway that rebuilds that magnificent space, but also contributes to the future of our city.
Thank you so much. Keith, I know you're here much later than you had said you could be. Do you have time for a 1-minute closing statement? And we'll give the same opportunity to Brad.
Of course.
So the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Sincerely, thank you to our moderator for holding us accountable here. And thank you to our great organizations for doing all the work you do. I'm, again, City Council Member Keith Powers, running for Manhattan Borough President. On the premise of I am a lifelong tenant. I'm a resident here in our borough who has been fighting for better tenant protections and fighting for better communities. My mom was a nurse right down the block at Bellevue. My dad owned a small business. We were able to build that through having a good neighborhood and good housing here that let the middle class continue to thrive here in a borough where that dream is eluding so many people. We have a lot of work to do in this city right now to create a safer, more affordable city and borough. We are the economic engine, and we are the engine of opportunity for people all over the world. And we are the place where big ideas come to fruition. So I want to be the borough president for big ideas, for affordable housing and for tenants, and making sure that we all have a vibrant future here. And I thank everyone for their time tonight.
Thank you. And Brad.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you everyone for these wonderful questions and the support you've provided our neighborhoods over the years. Brad Hoylman-Siegel represented the west side of Manhattan for the last 12 years, passed 370 bills in Albany. I hope I've shown to some that I'm an effective public official, but I really see what I do as a servant of the public through the eyes of my two daughters, age 7 and 14. My 14-year-old just asked me to bring home iced tea for her. But, what is the future for them? Can they afford to live in Manhattan? Will there be a place for them to have a good job? Will they be able to access mass transit safely and conveniently? Those are the big questions that I think about every day. And as your next borough president, frankly, it's going to be my job, or whoever the next borough president is, to figure it out. I hope my record demonstrates that the support from Gail Brewer, Jerry Nadler, and Dan Goldman, and other elected officials, I hope also suggests that I have a collaborative nature that I hope to continue with this group and others. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much to both State Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel and City Council Member Keith Powers. Thank you to the co-sponsoring organizations, the City Club, the New York Landmarks Conservancy, the Historic Districts Council, Landmark West, and Friends of the Upper East Side. We will be sharing the video of this with everybody soon. And by the way, we had well over 200 people come through here tonight. I'm sure hundreds more will be watching the video in the future. Thank you so much, everybody, for your participation, and we will be in touch. Have a good evening.